Hey everyone, welcome to 2023 Sentry Tournament of Champions preview here with my friend Andy Molitor. Good to be back. Couple weeks off. How you doing, bud?
Good. Yeah, it's wild. Haven't thought about golf for a spell. Been very busy. Obviously, college basketball is going on. The NFL's hitting the end of the season here. Christmas, New Year's, everything. Honestly, like the weather. It's just that like these motherfuckers are in Maui.
I
I
know.
we don't even have school today because there's so much freezing rain here. Like it's just the it's a skating rink out there right now. So like school is canceled even. So been kind of a mess, but yeah, I'm pumped. This is a fun tournament. If nothing else, if you don't like watching um, golf that you haven't bet on, like maybe you should bet on this one just to watch it. Like the views are stunning. I've
Yeah.
actually I've played this course,
Oh, okay.
and oh my
Boots in
god,
the ground takes.
it's crazy how like I'm like, man, this course is hard. And then you watch this, and it's like the ultimate birdie fest.
I
Like
know.
these guys are gonna score 25 unders. I'm shooting like 120. I hit a palm tree really hard. At one point, that was a crazy noise. But yeah, there's so many tee boxes where you're looking out at the ocean and there are whales jumping up and shit. It is nuts. Obviously, you don't have to take my word for it. Hawaii, better than Minnesota. Yeah, obviously that's a thing. So excited for this small field and a little normalcy. I remember a couple of years ago, a guy won this who hadn't even won a tournament the year prior because of the COVID stuff, and they needed to fill out the field. I believe it was Harris English.
Yeah.
So technically, to be in the Tournament of Champions, you have to be a winner from the previous year. But they canceled so many golf tournaments that they're like, well, we should invite a few more guys anyway. And then it's funny that Harris English ended up winning that, although he did win another tournament that year. So it felt like it was vindicated. Like he deserved to be there. Go Bulldogs. And yeah, if you want to, any takes on the course other than it's pretty easy.
Yeah. It did. It propelled him to a nice season there. So also, yeah. I mean, this is a. I mean, I didn't tell my wife, but I just remembered when we came back and I was looking at this. I remember looking in like maybe June. I was like, you know, we need to go on vacation. How can I like double bang this here and, put it around an event, maybe something like that. So I looked into like, maybe we can go to the Tournament of Champions. Seems like I remember I always watch it. I'm always like, there's no one there. It seems like a great event to go to live if you want to get like really up close and see a lot of good things because people aren't
Yeah.
necessarily traveling to Maui for the event. So I thought about it. My wife's not going to watch this, so she won't know that I thought about taking her to it. But maybe next year does seem like a beautiful place to go because it is kind of like a scenic porn for golf, which is pretty wild.
My podcast partner on the deep dive, Drew, recently went here, and he goes to Hawaii a couple times a year because it's the West Coast and it's like a way easier flight. You don't have to get to the West Coast first. But
Right.
this is where he traveled to, and yeah, I checked with him. It's still very nice there, he said. So yeah, not a bad golf trip if you're looking to make a trip and also taking an event. Like you said, the crowds are a little sparse. And I do wonder about that. That kind of comes into play in my mind a little. And I think you can't probably use this before the tournament. It's not like I'm full fade on this guy because of his Instagram post, but there are in these two Hawaiian tournaments, there are sometimes some guys where it's like, oh, he's on vacation.
Oh yeah.
Like he brought his wife and they're on vacation and he's not a serious golfer in these tournaments right now. There's always a couple guys like that. It's tough to tell pre-tournament. Once the golf starts, you can kind of get a feel for that.
Yeah, so you mentioned the change in the field. We're still kind of doing that thing. It's the change has been the guys that qualified top 40 for the Tour Championship. So we have 39 here. Rory continues to not come here, though. I would love to see Rory at this course where he can absolutely bomb driver all over the place. Because again, as you mentioned, unique course as well, right? They've been coming here for a long time, but it is a no cut event, small fields, par 73, the only one like that. And because it is long, you would think that it is a harder course. But again, we're dealing with massive elevation changes here, which actually leads to some of the, nuance and some of the scenic things that we see here because you have these elevated tee boxes these guys can just bomb it down into these just massive football field style fairways here for these guys to land some of these tee shots into as well. So you're also going to deal with a ton of wind. And that's actually kind of been the unique thing in terms of scoring from year to year. It's always been a birdie fest for the most part. JT won a couple years ago, just 14 under, which again, compared to what Cam Smith won last year at 34 is a big discrepancy. So you're going to see, I think it looks like based off of the weather right now, you're probably going to get into the 30s again here. Like that's just, you got to go low. You got to be hanging out in the mid 60s and then get really just hot with the putter. Ron PGA Splits does a great job putting together player quotes. And that's really strange. This isn't going to make sense when you think about scoring, but we do hear a lot of Augusta ties here because of the elevation changes, because of how frequently you're going to hit driver, because of how expansive the greens are and undulating. They're very challenging at times. So part of why you still see guys get into the 30s is because you're going to have a lot of wedge in hand. So guys that are really, hitting fairways, hitting long, and then being able to really dial in mid to short irons and get really hot with the putter is where we're going to get to here. So I do think experience matters here too. And that's another thing, Andy, what we get to with Augusta is very rarely do we see debutantes perform really well. Even though this is a spot where I think 30 is going to be in play, I do think some familiarity here is important.
Yeah, and as you talk about the changes in elevation, it's weird because it's such a out of sight, out of mind part of you can think about Colorado as a mountainous state, and maybe even parts of Wyoming, Montana, and I guess Alberta if you're Canadian, but Hawaii is
Lake Louise.
Hawaii is a mountainous state. Like you don't think about that because it's next to the ocean. There's just not enough room for it to get away from these volcanoes and these mountains. Like essentially, this is almost on the coast. It's still like a mountain freaking course because it's basically in the foothills, the come down of the big mountain in the middle of the damn island. Or it's off to the right side of the island, right? That's what they use in map making and cartography. It's on the right. So, but yeah, there is some undulation. There's some sloping. It is kind of a elevation course, if you will, just based on how it jumps up and down. And like we said, it's easy, but there's some difficulty, and it's kind of a shot maker's course. Like if you know what you're doing, like it's almost like there's a cheat code to every hole. Like you said with the experience thing, like it's like a video game. Once you've played this a few times, you're like, all right, this is this hole. Like here's how I turn this hole into an easy hole. Because like you said, people are going to shoot 2,500. And yeah, that JT win with the 14, it was windy, all 4 days? Just like the winds were just nuts. And that can happen. Does not appear as if it will be happening this week. Looks like the weather should be, pretty fantastic. And then, as mentioned, Ron put out a sprawling preview, as he does for every tournament, over on BetSports Golf. You can go read that. He not only does looks at the field, looks at the course history. He's got past leaderboards and weather up there for you to look at. Finish positions from the last 7 or 8 years for everybody who's in the field, how they've finished, how they've shot. Just at this event. So he split that out for you. And then he gets real deep into the course as well, does a whole analysis, looks at the strokes gained analysis, talks about which, the big 4 strokes gained, what do you want to call them? Buckets. Takes a look at those and decides how important they are this week, which parts of them that are important, and kind of gets granular in them. So would encourage you to read that. This is longer than usual. I guess he's had 6 weeks to work on this one, so man, maybe he got to.
They're so good, man. Like there's a lot of good free previews out there in the space, and we would be doing a disservice if we weren't out here, kind of saying that we feel really good about our stuff. I mean, I no joke. This is the best preview, the most extensive preview. If anything, you could argue, to Andy's point, there's too much information here. There's nothing that you're going to get anywhere else that wasn't in Ron's preview, and you're 1,000% going to get more than most out there. So he's taking the preview game up another notch, where I really thought they were as good as anything out there in the space last year. I think this getting a look at the leaderboards, the weather for the previous, few years, getting basically the 4 rounds for all the guys. You can see where the rounds went poorly and kind of line that up with the weather. As you mentioned too, the finishing positions and strokes gained categories of how they played here in the last 7-8 years is pretty great stuff. So you mentioned the vacation piece.
It is free to read too. So I will post that. If you're on the YouTube, it'll be in the what do you want to call it?
Show notes.
Yeah, the show notes below it here. So you can click on that link, take a look at it.
One of the big things this season, Andy, is the elevated events and the PGA Tour, basically, and some of the good stuff that's come of LIV for the PGA players is the tour has gone out and quote unquote elevated some events. And basically what that's done is increased points, increased prize pools. And while this is a Hawaii event, and I think there is something to your point around vacation golf, this one is an elevated event. So I do think, even though it makes it a little harder because we obviously like to talk about form a lot, more so than course history or any of those things. And we don't have form. We've been basically without golf for 6 weeks. We've been without the majority of the fields for, roughly 3 months, right? We've been kind of shut down since the Tour Championship. So how do you approach this kind of layoff? Is it a lighter card for you? How do we, again, small field, no cut events, those are kind of their own bucket anyway. So we kind of have these two things coalescing here. How do you take a look at this card and where do you start to build?
It is going to be a lighter card for me. And I do struggle at some of these small field events because as anyone who's like followed me or watched how I bet, what I bet, a lot of my matchup bets aren't going to be, JT versus Rory. It's often like way down the card, guys. Like we're way further down the card than a lot of that. Like I'm
David Lipsky and Marty Laird.
Yeah, I'm doing the David Lipsky -1.5 over some player on the Corn Ferry Tour that's up that week. Like it's usually way down, and that's not something we have with the smaller field and all the good players. I will have matchups. There's going to be some I like still, but the same goes for outrights. Like I'm usually placing 4 to 6 outrights. I don't know if that's something I want to do in a field of this size, especially with just like, man, if Rahm or basically there's 3 or 4 guys at the top where it's like, if they just play well, it's kind of over. So I'm not sure you want to be taking long shots on the Postman or Spawn or stuff like that. It's not that kind of tournament. While it's not a, putting contest or a dart throwing contest, it does just come down to like, who can come in here and just wreck a course because they're so damn good at golf. And there are like, a dozen guys like that in this one. So smaller card for me, especially with the outright or the matchups. I know those aren't up at Chris yet, so I haven't bet into any of those. But even with the top of the board being pretty Rahm and Scotty heavy, it doesn't leave a lot of room leave a lot of meat on the bone for some of the guys I want to be betting. I don't know, how are you approaching it?
Yeah, that's the thing. It will definitely be a lighter card. I don't think either of us have made a bet yet, so we're going to try to talk each other into some bets. It is the nature of a small loaded field. It's really hard to talk yourself into guys down the board. And you look at previous scoreboards, you have had, Matt Jones snuck in last year as a top 3. Ryan Palmer, T4. And again, like that tells you that those guys can get in the mix, but it also tells you it's going to be very hard for them to close the deal. Matt Jones went nuclear 62-61 on the weekend last year. And it still wasn't enough to just get Rahm, who just plods away at the 66, throws a 61 in there. Like they're very consistent. So I think even if you have an inkling to go a little bit down the board, but I guess down the board in this would be probably 50 and below. Those guys for me would still be, I think, better served as finishing position bets. And even that's something that I do more than the matchups. Whereas you do matchups more, that's very difficult here as well, just because the price is so, I think, prohibitive versus obviously a full field event. Obviously, it's very easy relative to, get a top 10 with a 39-man field, but you're having to lay some juice in some of those instances, and it's tough to do. So not exactly sure how I'll approach it. I might treat it like I did the swing season, which is just take a couple of outright shots and, stay away from some of that other stuff. But we'll see. It depends on the conviction that you and I get here as we kind of talk through some of these guys here. And you mentioned, no Rory. So We got basically Rom, Scotty, and Xander at the top of the board at most spots. There's some other guys, Cantley, JT, are like right around 10 to 11 at most other books. That's kind of the top of the board. It's really funny to hear Rom's quotes here about how he's struggled at this course. And again, part of it is the field. His field size is so small. Rom has struggled here the last 5 years. He's never finished worse than 10th.
Top 10 all 5 years, yeah.
Yeah, multiple second places, including last year. Second in his debut here, so that kind of laughs in the face of you want to have experience. But again, it's Jon Rahm, kind of a historical outlier. Anyway, we talked about Augusta. Obviously, Scotty did that pretty well. Xander's done that pretty well in his career. He's also won here before. Is there anyone at the top for you that's really caught your eye, or are you looking to kind of turn the page and go to the next tier?
Yeah, I mean, kind of a little further down. If I did have to bet one of the top players, it might be Justin Thomas out of all of those. Like, just Rahm's and Scotty's price are just a little too low compared to the other guys. JT having the best price out of the 5 at most places is kind of, I don't know, sexy to me. He's another one too. He's not been the past 4 years, and you go back. I'm end pointing. Go to 5 years. He finished 22nd, but the past 4 years have all been top 5s. It's 5th, 3rd, 1st, 3rd. Like, yeah, he's another one that he's played well here. He actually won this as well in 2017. Like, you can say that about all these guys. Honestly, everyone at the top, except for Jon Rahm, has won this. I guess Cantlay has his best finish was 4th as well. But even Spieth has won this way back in 16. But there's so many people that have won this tournament that have just come here and performed well every year. That's where I'm looking at. Like, if I had to take one of the top 5 guys, it's probably Justin Thomas. He didn't do anything wrong over the course of the last however much of a sample size you want to use for like current form or whatever you're looking at. And again, it's hard to say current form because some of these guys haven't played in such a long time, but
yeah.
And I think maybe it is fair to look at some of the sample sizes of guys who have look at their January golf year in, year out. Who is able to come in an awful layoff like this and just play well? Usually, the 2 Hawaiian tournaments are a good bellwether of that, but JT's consistently come here and played well. He's one of those who has been able to just pop off and come in off a long layoff like this and play well. So looking at him, I don't know what the best price on the board is, but I mean, if there was, some 13, 14s, that's a look.
It looks like 12.5 at Chris looks like the best that you're going to be able to get. Stateside, 11 at MGM, 11 at Bet365 are probably your best looks. Ryan Ron hit that last week at 12. There were 14s briefly yesterday, and I considered it, but we're back down at 11. I kind of agree with you, just because I don't think in general that there's much that separates JT from the top guys anyway. And you're basically, in comparison to Rahm, you're basically getting twice the number. So I just don't think that you can really make a case that should be the case. So, you really, again, when you're talking about elite golfers that haven't played for the most part in 3 months, we're basically splitting hairs. So you should be making decisions here for the most part based on price and price alone. These guys have not had a very busy swing season. Like, Rahm's not playing a lot of events. JT's not playing a lot of events. 5th at the Hero, early December. So at least we've seen him. We saw him in an amateur fashion, but that's like him just going out and playing with his boys anyway. So to your point, he has played well at this time of year a lot over the last handful of years. So I kind of agree with you there. How about we get to the next tier? We will look at some of these prices that I think are maybe a little bit more interesting. Finau does not have a great history here, but again, played better golf at the end of the year last year. And you think about a guy that you want when he can just let loose with the driver. Finau is a guy that I love to attack, has put up some pretty strong showings at Augusta historically. Cam Young we're paying like full boat for Cam Young, who's never played here before. We're basically like 18 to 22 out there in the market. That's a little thin for me. Sanjay's played well here. You can get him around 20. Hovland seems like a sexy name this year because he's looked to kind of put a little bit together here in the swing season. People seem to be, on the Hovland train, just going into the season. Morikawa and Fitzpatrick are kind of in that bucket as well. What do you like?
Yeah, Morikawa's one for me. There's a 26 out there. Like again, he should be priced like Tony Finau. He should be priced like Matthew Fitzpatrick. He should be priced probably like Sung J M. Like that number's just long for me. That's going to be on the card. And I mean, you're right. Like the JT price being $12.50 at Chris, I'm going to bet that. So just like the deep dive some weeks where I'm sitting here just making bets on air, but I'm going to go poke around. Is there a better price? Because I know you're better at this. Like you're my guy for this.
That's your best number. There are 18s out there. So 26.5 on Chris is your best look for sure.
It does make me nervous sometimes when Chris is the best number by a lot because they take a lot more money. But
sure,
currently, right now, and I don't think this is because Andy's limited at Chris on golf outrights, but currently you can't bet very much. Like they're taking to win. Well, I mean, they're taking to win 50,000, but usually it's much, much higher. It will be higher later in the week. So I feel like they take at least twice that. So maybe limits are a little lower and we haven't seen it. I'll be sad if the Morikawa number continues to go the other way. But at 26-1, that's a wager for me. Like you said, he's only played here a couple times, but he has played well in those. Those were both top 10 finishes. 3, 5, 7, and 7. He's played this 3 times. Average finishing position has been 6th here. He hasn't done anything wrong. A little bit of a struggle around the greens, but even pretty marginal putting for him. Like average to above average putting for him here. So if he can continue to just play the tee to green game that kind of makes him good, I think we're gonna be just fine here.
Yeah, he had one year where he was just lights out tee to green and then didn't putt well. Another year where he was just kind of average, which isn't typically what we see from Morikawa, tee to green, and then putted pretty well. So maybe, and I've seen some stuff of him in the offseason talking about going back to some stuff that's worked for him in the past, rewatching his putting at Harding Park, and then getting a feel for stuff that he can, implement for this season. And that seems to have worked for him at the Hero. He got 6th of the Hero. Played pretty well there, and I feel like that's some good momentum that we want to maybe carry in here. And you said, a couple of 7ths and a 5th here, at least in the mix, right? So we haven't had these spots where he's like, barely finished, in the top 30 or something here. He's done well enough. Again, a spot where he's a little bit behind the rest of these guys in terms of distance. This is one of those spots that just doesn't really matter because even though it's a long course, everyone with these elevation changes are rolling down into wedge territory. And we didn't see it last year as much, but even Colin's bad, approach game and wedge game is still significantly above average. So the ceiling here, I think is pretty massive. And that's it'd be a play for me too. I love 26. It's a great number.
And I think that's kind of where we're at with this. Like the medium to long iron game here is going to be just kind of massively important. You could go on any site and look up proximity prices or proximity ranks, proximity numbers. And if you find one that Colin Morikawa is out of the top, 5 in, it's maybe 10, because they break these down in such small buckets, but overall proximity, I'm guaranteeing he's top 3. He's a wizard with his irons. And that is what matters here. I think before, I'd love it if it was this year because I just bet on that. But I think before his career is over, he gets a win at this course because it is kind of set up for him. You just have to be great with your medium to long irons and make a few putts, and you're going to score a shitload. So love him here. And Christ, that might be, I don't know, the Sung JM number not being above 20 bothers me. I wanted some of that. I don't want any Hovland. I don't want Cam Young without having really played here. The Tom Kim number is very depressed based on just how his season went. It's tough for me to make a case for a lot of these other guys around 20. Yeah,
I wish Sanjay was a little bit longer as well. I'm with you. I think that he's really interesting, but I think that that's pretty sharp and probably indicative that it's probably the right price, to be honest, because it's pretty flat across the market, right around 18 to 20 everywhere. So the Tom Kim thing's interesting to me because what we're the same case we're making for Colin is essentially what we saw from Tom Kim last year, except there's seems to be a pretty stable sample of elite putting. Now we'll see how that kind of pans out, because we know that's obviously the most noisy of the strokes gained buckets, but it seemed to be places last year where maybe distance was, neutralized a little bit, where he can rely on his irons and a hot putter. Man, like he's shown that in spades. I would, again, rather see him have a little bit of experience here, considering that the number is really close to Morikawa, who is, I think in the next tier up and has played here. So we are probably a little too close, but Tom Kim definitely was a place I looked at. I wish we were getting kind of north of 30s. And this is the opposite of what you're talking about with Morikawa, down at Chris. Kim's 21 and a half. Like that's telling you that they're probably taking some early money on him comparative to, like, Pinnacle's almost 30, 28 on 365. So it's an interesting spot because Kim's getting some looks.
Yeah, if I go and find a 30, that's not something that isn't interesting to me. Like in a small field, the guy's kind of nails. Like he doesn't seem to be this young player who's going to let a moment like playing against some good players. Especially, it is kind of a relaxed atmosphere. This isn't Augusta. This isn't, oh my God, this could change my legacy. This is the Tournament of Champions. It is January. You're going up against the NFL. You're going up against, it's college championship weekend. Like there's so much other stuff happening that it's not on, the big radar of sports media even. So it's not like some pressure moment, but even if it were, he just doesn't seem to give a shit. Like, remember in the President's Cup?
Yeah, it was awesome.
The guy's just ice. So if he's 30, man, that might be the. I feel like I'm gonna have 4 bets, and I think that's pretty close to a fourth. Although, what do you do if you had to bet similar prices? Him, Sammy Burns, and Will Zalatoris, all around that kind of area there. It's a tough choice.
It's a tough choice. I was going to get to basically this bucket of 4 guys that are right around these numbers that I bet constantly. And now I'm getting them at like better numbers than I bet them at typically in a small field event. So I really don't know how to approach that. Sam Burns is a guy that I love to back all the time. We don't have a ton of experience here, but at least he's played here. Last year, 19th. When I think of guys that I want, like Sam Burns, when he's off a little bit, kind of like JT, again, we're like splitting hairs with these guys, but sometimes they could spray it off the tee. You just aren't really punished for that here as much. Yeah. And then like Burnsy can be literally the best putter on tour for stretches of time. And if we need to go super low, I think he has that in the bag. So Zalatoris, again, you can make a case just because he hasn't played here that you want to cross him off a little bit. That makes sense to me. But again, like how many times am I going to jump at Zalatoris when we're like right around 30? And they're like, Chris is 33, FanDuel's 31. Like I want 30s on Zal in full field events. And now I only have 39 guys. So like, that's really hard for me to not want to get involved with. So this is tough. I mean, I think Homa's in that mix as well. Homa pictured nicely here. It's just a guy that I threw a lot of money at down the stretch last year, and for the most part was rewarded. Has played here before, including last year where he got 15th, which is better than Sam Burns' one showing. And I just think I think Homa's that guy now. I think he is in this mix of guys where we're not going to be finding 50s on Max anymore, 60s, like we cashed at Wells Fargo. Like that's just not happening anymore. He's just been so consistently good. Won again on the swing season at the Fortinet, defended that title, played really well. And like the 45 at Chris is a number that I would love to have on a domestic shop. So, cause I think he's in the mix. I think he's just kind of one of those guys that should be in consideration in this next tier outside of the top guys.
Yeah, I bet him that 45 is obscene. He should be priced ahead of Sam Burns. He's a better golfer right now, I think. And like, I know it was a quick ascension. It was a weird ascension because it's like he was on tour. He was just another guy who was better than the pack, but then he quickly ramped up and multiple wins, decent fields. It's not like he won some. It's not like he's gone Hovland and like, oh, this guy he won in Puerto Rico and we think he's going to be good. Like he has a good win. He has some good performances against top fields. And 45 is too much. I think that was the one that I circled first before you kind of talked me into JT, considering like my argument with the top 5 and him being the longest price and probably shouldn't be the longest price was fine. Morikawa just getting that good number. But yeah, the Max Homa number right off the bat, 45 is way too much. That should be 30 in a field like this. He's an elite golfer now. Like and he has hashtag perspective. So there's that.
I think that's a bad number. One guy we skipped that I want to go back to is not a guy who typically bet a lot. I don't think it's a guy that you backed very often last year. And that's Jordan Spieth, who is anywhere from, I don't know, 25 to, it looks like DraftKings is 22 to 28. DraftKings is typically short. So what do we think about Jordan? It's kind of a checkered past here, has won here before. When he was kind of at his peak of Spieth, there was obviously a number of years, like 4 consecutive appearances here. He was inside the top 10, came back last year, obviously had a nice 2021, and then was 21st here. But like, again, another guy that like can sometimes spray it, has the added distance that he's, just continue to kind of stack up over the last year or so. And then we know the putter can get crazy, and he's familiar with this place and has played well at Augusta in the past. I wish it was a little bit longer because he is, kind of in this bucket of guys that we're talking about, but maybe the most expensive of them all. How do you feel about Jordan here?
25, I'm close. But yeah, he doesn't have the chops here. Like if he recently, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, he's won here, but it was in 2016. The world was a different place, guys. I mean, it's a long time ago. I mean, even Jordan Spieth was a different golfer a long time ago. I mean, we had the whole year, I feel like it was 2020 or 2021, where, I mean, he was kind of horrible. And he's come back a lot off that. He's a lot better golfer than we saw there. He made some changes. He's been better, but just, like he didn't play this for a few years. He got 21st last year. I'm not super excited at 25. Maybe he's in the short list of guys that goes on a little notebook you keep an eye on. You star him even though you didn't bet him to see what's going on, and you look for some stuff. You watch the Thursday rounds and you see if maybe he's worth a live bet. I think that's probably where he's at for me. The best number I'm seeing is 25. Probably just not enough.
All right, I need your help. Just, as a friend, what do I do and how do I approach the Aaron Wise situation this season? He's ascending, and we can see it in the marketplace too, because in my opinion, even though I'm as committed as I can be, as anyone can be, he is in this mix, right? He is 33, 34, 35. Some places he's a little bit longer. Chris is one of those places. You can make the case that he's not necessarily in that group yet, right? He's not winning golf tournaments. He's playing better. A lot of the key indicators around like ball striking and these things are all trending really well. I'm pot committed, right? Just from I've backed him so often. I can't be here on a Sunday without a Aaron Wise ticket. I don't want to have to like ape in on a Sunday at like 5-1 or, minus 110 because I have to have the ticket, right? Like, what do I do with Aaron Wise this season? How do I approach early season Aaron Wise?
Like, this is not good betting advice, guys. Like, turn the stream off, turn the bet stream off, but like everybody has their tax. Like Calhoun has his guys where he'll bet every week. It's like, hey, here's my card. And then he'll be like,
Cam Davis.
I'm betting Cam Davis because I bet Cam Davis every time until he wins. Like, I mean, he's like close to 50. You can get pretty close to 50. You just keep betting him because you're gonna feel awful when he wins. Like,
I can't. That's the thing is I am okay.
Like that was a Zal at the
100%.
What was the one he won the first week of the playoffs?
Yeah, St. Jude. Yeah,
St. Jude. Like that was. I can't imagine how it have felt.
No way.
Zal tickets all year. I needed that. Like it was absolutely cathartic to get that out of the way. Like maybe I'll never bet on Zalatoris again. I'm sure I will, but like after how many times we've had close calls and how many good tournaments he played, especially big tournaments where he had big numbers. Like I needed that. So I think bad betting advice, good friend advice, good for your mental health advice. Like you have to have a small ticket on Aaron Wise.
That's what I gotta do. It's just maybe a smaller ticket on spots where I don't love him. But I just, that way I at least have something I can kind of get back, and I'm not like burying myself to ever get back square. But you're right. Like, I do think there are some spots like he's played really well at the Memorial. He feels like a guy that would go to Harbor Town and play really well. Like those types of courses. Obviously there's some nice stuff early in his career on coastal courses, and you can make a case is obviously on the water. So there's an Aaron Wise ticket to be had here. 40 on 365 looks like the best domestic MGM as well. So I prefer to get the 48 that Chris has out there. So one other guy is interesting. This has been a hard guy to back for so many reasons. And again, we're talking about history here being decent. I think, it's been at kind of in the same time frame as Spieth, a third, a second, a fourth. Last couple of years hasn't been as great, but it's kind of been indicative of the player in general, who's also has a green jacket, and that's Hideki Matsuyama, who I have no idea what to make of Hideki's health coming into this game or into this event. We know we're probably not going to have that information, rarely ever. We don't have a, amateur tournaments or, a pro-am on Wednesday for him to back out of, for us to have a sense of, how the back or whatever the injuries are. But there are north of 50s in the market on Hideki. There are 40s on Hideki. I feel like a healthy Hideki is very much in the Spieth, Burns, Morikawa bucket, maybe a little bit at the bottom of it, but he's definitely in that. And he's basically twice their price. Am I like crazy to be looking into Hideki to see if I can get any Japanese translations on Twitter to hear about his status or, anything like that? Because I feel like Hideki is probably too long.
It is. I just scare away because of the injury stuff. Like he's always somehow injured. So it's 52-50. Like I'm close, but like I'm worried that someone knows something, because why is he that long? And he has had just this plethora of injuries and withdrawals, and like withdrawing from the pro-am because he's not feeling super up to it. So yeah, I'm scared off of this, but it's just another one. He's on the list. Like if he comes out and looks good, I'm gonna feel bad about it later. Not getting the best of the number, but he's definitely something I would add.
Yeah.
Like if he looks healthy, if he looks he's playing well, if he looks like a guy who played well in Hawaii last year, he's somebody
He
I'd
won.
add it. I'd add it at like 20-25. So there's no shame in hitting a 25.
Good news, he withdrew last time we saw him at Houston. So again, early November. So not a
it's been a long time.
But that's kind of Hideki in a nutshell. That's kind of for me, and I don't know about you, is kind of the threshold of guys that I think legit can go out and win this event. Now, obviously,
I almost said that from the top. Like you start at the bottom and you look at like, all right, like Luke List, Shezrevi, Ramey, Molinek, Spawn. Again, these are all names of people I have bet outright bets on in the past. I have plenty of JJ Spawn bets. Just
Svensson.
Not this week. Hoagie, not this week.
Yeah.
Thigala, Keegan, not this week. Like you start at the bottom and you just work your way up and draw a line, and then you have a much smaller field to look at and start crossing off from there. That is what I did, and yeah, I'm at the same spot. Like even Corey Connors, Billy Horschel, Adam Scott, Henley's another guy that I love. I run my numbers; it's gonna love him just as much. But like there's a line of demarcation I have to stop at a certain spot with a high end, top heavy field like this, and that's where it's at. So yeah, I'm done. That's my card. Like, I haven't finished it completely, but JT at 12, Colin at 26, Home at 45, with a possible Tom Kim ticket, and that might be it.
Yeah, the rest of the guys are. I mean, that you can make a case that they are like this year's Matt Jones, and some of them are better than Matt Jones, right? I mean, you can make a case for those guys to be, in the mix. But for me, for an outright position, man, they got to put together some great golf and just hope some of the best guys in the world don't do the same. And you're up against so many other tremendous golfers. And I do think the elevated purse matters. I mean, obviously the guys at the top of the board are making so much money anyway, but again, you can get some of these early points. It sets you up for a very easy year if you need it. You see early season FedEx Cup points, and you're like, what happened? It's like, oh yeah, that guy played really well in Hawaii, and so here he is. He's still in the top 10 despite having done nothing in the West Coast swing for 4 consecutive weeks. So that's kind of my mark. I mean, I think some of these guys are interesting if we wanted to get into like finishing position bets or stuff like that. Or some of these guys too in general, like Thigala is a guy that I would not mind having positions on this season, just kind of an ascending talent. I know we bet Svensson a ton of times last year. He finally got over the hump in the swing season. But again, I'm not laying 120s on Svensson in this type of field. Sepp is a guy that I have no problem backing if it's the right event for him. But again, this is not the place for Sepp. So is there anyone here that is maybe a look for you? Again, I don't know if you've run all the numbers that you might think is like going to be a buy from a matchup standpoint.
Yeah, matchups and possibly top 10 looks. Hoagie and Cam Young. Like I mentioned, I can't bet either of them to win, but I can Hoagie's skill set matches up pretty well here. When we saw him, we saw what he can do when everything's clicking at Pebble there, and it's similar enough. He's great. He's a great proximity guy. His irons are strong enough to play well here. But again, for him to win, it would just be like, oh man, Rahm had a bad week. You know who else had a bad week? Scotty Scheffler, Justin Thomas, Patrick Cantlay, Schauffele, Finau, Kim, M, Morikawa, and Sam Burnt. It's a lot for Tom Hoagie to really, really ramp it up and take a win here. But I love him as a top 10. I'm probably going to have some positional bets. I'm going to shop that around this week. And then, he's a guy I'm looking for in matchups. And same with Cam Young, unfamiliarity with the course. But if he plays his best golf, he's somewhere near the top quartile of this field. And I think if I get a decent top 10 price on him, that's something I'm going to be looking at as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a mistake that he's up there price wise, but, just another guy that's just, constantly in the mix. Big boy fields, big boy tracks. He had such a nice rookie year. So I get why we're up there with him. It just feels like comparatively Tom Kim is, I think, a better fit for this place. But again, Cam Young is an elite putter as well. At least showed that last year over a fairly large sample. So it's not just bomb and gouge stuff. He is able to go low in spots that's required. So yeah, kind of it for me.
Yeah, I mean, you get plus money on Hoagie to finish top 20, which is basically just top half.
Yeah,
that's a bet. By the way, that's a bet. I'm making that. Put it on the board. So, I think that's all I have for this one. It is still us easing our way into things. It'll be a little bit before we get into the real meat of the season. But like you said, with these elevated events, it's going to draw more good golfers to some of these tournaments where they might not have come. Basically everyone but Rory. So this is a hell of a field. Should be fun. I'm excited to, the other TV only goes on really for, football games and stuff. Obviously a little bit of basketball here and there, but I'll be excited to have the second monitor on watching some golf because I'm assuming they fix that too. And I'll be able to easily stream every shot of every tournament this year.
Yeah, I'm sure. I can't wait for the Netflix show. I'm really hoping that propels a ton of interest in the game that we love to watch, we love to play, we love to bet. I'm hoping that kind of helps pull fire underneath everyone too. Lots of great stuff coming here. We've been talking about our research tool for months. It's been worked on for months. The reason that it's talked about for months is it's not something you can just be like, oh, hey, let's put this together. I know we have both been had our hand in the dirt putting it together. We're hoping to turn it on, and it will be a prominent part of this show moving forward once that happens. Excuse me. Probably around waste management players. It's kind of where we're at.
We'll take the rest of the football season to kind of perfect things because want to give people the best possible tool to create their own custom models at very, very detailed depths. Save them, use them again the next week if they want. Save them, use them down the road if they want. Say hey, I built a model for a course of this, this kind of setup. I want to go back and not rebuild that because I have it saved and I can just pull it up. It'll update well, here's what the current field with the current stats would look like if you wanted to split the stats and mash them up in that way. So I think it's gonna be really nice for people who have spent a lot of time doing legwork trying to put together some custom stats and custom rankings for themselves each week. So that'll be exciting. We'll be using that on screen as we go once we have that up and live. And like I said, check out Ron's preview. It's in the show notes on the YouTube. Free to read. It's very long, very good, very detailed. You're going to take away a lot if you spend some time with that today. And best of luck with all your betting in 2020. I know the season starts in like October or whatever, but it's the calendar year. Let's get real with it.
So, not anymore. This is it. This is last year, right?
That was
last year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So swing season.
We're gonna have some normalcy to how the season works and is portrayed by the golf media now. So 2023, Ryan Noonan and me. Best of luck, guys. We'll see you later.